Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be making my official March Madness bracket with who I think will win in each round, not necessarily who I think will be the better team. I'm going to be going in depth with who I think will win, and I'm going to be trying to win that perfect bracket prize money. Okay, we're starting off here in the South Regional, where the first game is 1-seeded Auburn versus 16-seeded Alabama State tomorrow, I think. And that's a pretty obvious game. Auburn's the number 1 overall seed, and they're playing a 16 seed. Only 2 16 seeds have ever won, and Auburn's a 31-point favorite. So we're going to be going with Auburn here. Pretty easy pick there. Next up, though, we do have one of the hardest selections in all of the bracket. Louisville versus Creighton, the 8 versus 9 game. Typically, 9 seeds do win this, but Louisville is the number 10 team in the final AP poll at 27-7. They went 18-2 in the ACC and finished second in conference. They are a 2.5-point favorite. Creighton does have a 16-point per game scorer who also averages 7 assists per game, Stephen Ashworth, and a big man, Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's averaging 19, 9, and 2. But I do kind of like Louisville's overall team a little bit better. Creighton's really just those two and a bunch of younger, more inexperienced guys. But if you look at Louisville, they have 3 guys averaging 12 or more points, including 2 averaging 16 or more. Chucky Hepburn is the best guy on the team, averaging 16, 4, and 6. The senior guard, who's a transfer from Wisconsin. They don't have a dominant big man, but they do have James Scott, a 6'11 sophomore, averaging 7 and 6. He's going to have to likely take on the assignment of guarding Ryan Kalkbrenner. I think Kalkbrenner will have a really good game, but Chucky Hepburn is 100% going to lock up Stephen Ashworth. Hepburn is a finalist for College Basketball Defensive Player of the Year, and since Ashworth is one of the only 2 decent guys on the Creighton team, those top 2, if he's locked up, Kalkbrenner's going to have to just carry, and I don't know if he really can, because outside of the top 2, Kalkbrenner and Ashworth, their next leading scorer is Jemiah Neal, who's only averaging 11 points a game, and then Jackson McAndrew, who's only averaging 8. They would be probably my pick if Pop Isaacs wasn't hurt, but since he's hurt, I think I'm going to go with the Louisville Cardinals in this game. Next up, Michigan and UC San Diego. This is another game that a lot of people have been picking upsets. Michigan is only a 2.5-point favorite in this one, and they are led by 2 7-footers, 6'11" power forward Danny Wolf, who's averaging 13, 10, and 4, and 7'1" Vladislav Golden, who's averaging 17, 7, and 1. That's the main reason I think that Michigan can win this game, is just because of their size and how UC San Diego is a mid-major team that doesn't really have any true center who can stop 2 7-footers. UC San Diego is a really good team. They're 30-4. They went 18-2 in the Big East, or the Big West, and they have the number 1 defensive rating in all of the country and have the 6th least points allowed per game in all of college basketball. But I don't know if they can take down the Michigan Wolverines in this game, because Michigan has the 2 7-footers. The tallest guy on all of UC San Diego's team is 6'10" Cade Pendleton, who's only averaging 3 and 1 per game this year. Their starting center is Norden Kapich, who's averaging 11 points and 5 rebounds a game. And if there's 2 7-footers on Michigan, both starting at the same time, going against UC San Diego, I don't care what the rest of the team can do. Unless UC San Diego's offense can just completely outscore them and get steals and transition buckets, I really think that Michigan should be able to win this game. It may be really close, but I think that they will be able to win. Hayden Gray is on the watch for College Basketball Defensive Player of the Year at UC San Diego. And they have Anawana Tate Jones, 6'6" power forward, averaging 20 points a game. And the only reason I'm considering them to win is because Gray's averaging 3 steals a game. And I feel like they'll be able to get buckets and go out in transition off of steals. But I still think I have to pick Michigan in this game just because of the height advantage. Next up, we have Texas A&M versus Yale. This is another game I'm really undecided about, and I feel like it could be an upset because Texas A&M is the 4 seed going against 13-seeded Yale, but Texas A&M is a very inconsistent team this year. They were 22-10 and 11-7 in the SEC, 5th in the conference. They did lose in the conference tournament to Texas. They got upset. I like Texas A&M's defense, but their offense is really, really bad this year. Wade Taylor and Zurich Phillips are the only guys that can really score on the entire team. Taylor's averaging 16 points a game, while Phillips is averaging 14, but they're the only 2 guys averaging more than 10 points a game. And they're both short point guards who are starting together in the backcourt. They don't have much great size. I mean, like, Pharrell Payne is their starting center, only averaging 5 rebounds a game at 6'9". Then they have Henry Coleman, a former Duke power forward, who's averaging 6 rebounds a game at 6'7". But I don't think that they will be able to really easily win this game against Yale. Yale is another shorter team, but they were 22-7 and 13-1 in the Ivy League. And they have a 6'10" center, Samson Alaton. I don't think that he'll be able to out-rebound Payne and Coleman on Texas A&M. But I feel like he'll be able to help. And the guy that's really the deciding factor for me in this game is Yale small forward John Poulikitis, 6'5" senior shooting guard, small forward from Naperville, Illinois. He's averaging almost 20 points a game, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. He's a senior, and he was on that Yale team that upset Auburn last year. And I really think that Yale could win this game. All it takes is for these 2 guys right here on the right, Poulikitis and Townsend. If they both get hot, Yale has enough people on their team that can help them end up closing out games against better teams. I'm going with the Yale Bulldogs in this one. Next up, we have Ole Miss and North Carolina. This was going to be an easy win from Ole Miss before I saw what North Carolina did last night. I feel like North Carolina is playing a little bit different now that they made it into the tournament. And I think that they're going to make it a little bit closer game than people are going to expect. Because here's the thing. Ole Miss has one guy averaging 15 points per game, but they don't really have a number 2 guy. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. UNC's not my pick, at least not yet. But Ole Miss is actually not even favored. UNC is favored by 1.5 points. I do think that UNC will have a pretty good shot, though. Because if you just look at it from a statistics standpoint, Ole Miss doesn't have a guy that you need in the tournament that can go out and get 20 points and be the number 1 guy on a tournament team. Sean Padula is close, but he's a 6'1" point guard who's only averaging 15, 3, and 3. He could go for 20 and prove me wrong. But if he goes for 20, RJ Davis, who he might have to guard on North Carolina, who's a top probably 10 Power 5 scorer in the country, RJ Davis, I think, is going for 25, 30, maybe even 40 points. And that's the thing you really need in the NCAA tournament, is a guy that can just go out and score buckets and end up just carrying your team to a win. I'm going to go with UNC here, like officially, because I just think that they have the better chance to win. Ole Miss isn't a bad team. They have a 6'9" power forward who's averaging 11 and 6, Malik Dia. Jamin Breakfield's pretty good. He used to play at Duke. Jalen Murray's fine. Dre Davis is good. Matthew Morrell is good. But I feel like UNC, if they can just get it together, they can win this game. I know that no one's going to really pick them, but I do think that they will be able to win. If we just take a quick look at North Carolina's stats this year, they were 23-13 and 13-7 in the ACC. Hubert Davis is an awful coach, but they do have the top 50 offensive rating in the country and the 28th hardest strength of schedule this year. And they just have more guys on that team. More guys that can go out and get 15 to 20 points. I think that they probably are going to win that game. I don't think that they're going to go on a deep run, but I think that they will be able to beat Ole Miss. Next up, we have Iowa State and Lipscomb. This is a pretty easy prediction for me. Iowa State's looked great, and even though star shooting guard Keyshawn Gilbert is not playing in the tournament, I think that Curtis Jones is good enough to carry them. I watched when Iowa State got eliminated against BYU in the Big 12 tournament. Curtis Jones was just different. He really could just go out and get buckets whenever he wanted, and the defense could not stop him until late in the game when it really did matter. But BYU is also one of the better defenses in the country. Lipscomb has the 44th best defensive rating in the country, but they did not play anyone hard that impacts the defensive rating very much. Their hardest opponent was Arkansas, and they lost by 16 and allowed 76 total points. If we look at the box score of that game, they probably gave up like 25 points to Boogie Fland, who's another guard. And Fland had 17 and John L. Davis had 15. If we look at another game against good guards, against Kentucky, Lipscomb gave up 20 points to Jackson Robinson and 16 to Lamont Butler. I think Jacob Ognjenovic is going to put up a fight for Lipscomb, but Iowa State's really easily going to win this game, I think. Next up, Marquette and New Mexico. This is another just really hard game to predict because these are two teams that match up pretty evenly. Marquette was 23-10 and 13-7 in the Big East this year, and New Mexico was 26-7 and 17-3 in the conference. The reason this isn't just an easy Marquette pick for me is because Marquette's really got carried by Cam Jones this year. Cam Jones is a 6'4" senior point guard who's averaging 19, 5, and 6 this year. And if you take him off of this Marquette team, they're probably at the bottom of the Big East with DePaul and Butler. I don't think that they're a good team without him. David Joplin is a really good guy. He's 6'7", averaging 14 and 6 a game. Stevie Mitchell's a great defender, averaging 11 as a great defender. But I really think Cam Jones is just the heart and soul of this team. And they're playing against a team in New Mexico who has Donovan Dent, who is one of the better on-ball defenders in the country, and he can also average 21 points a game. He's a 6'2" point guard. He's probably going to be the on-ball defender for Cam Jones. Let's see if they have his defensive rating in here. He has 2.1 defensive win shares, and he also... I don't know how to really tell that. But comparing his 2.1 defensive win shares, he's going against Stevie Mitchell, who averaged 1.9 defensive win shares. And Stevie Mitchell is looking like probably, I think he might have won the Big East Defensive Player of the Year. And Donovan Dent has more defensive win shares than him. He's going to lock up Cam Jones. I'm not saying Cam Jones is going to have an awful game, but Cam Jones might be held to 15 points, which is below his average, and that's ultimately a win for New Mexico. New Mexico's also got one of the best mid-major coaches in the country, Rick Pitino's son, Richard Pitino, and they are averaging 81 points a game, which is 26th in the country, and they have the 16th best defensive rating in the entire country. Alongside Donovan Dent, they also have this guy right here on the bottom right, Nelly Jr. Joseph, who's averaging 14 and 11. And then they have True Washington, a 6'4" guard who's averaging 11 and 4. This isn't going to be an easy win for New Mexico if they do end up pulling it off. but I think that they should be able to get the win. They played against St. John's and only lost by 14. That's a common opponent, and I think that it's going to be just a hard game to predict overall for people making their last couple brackets today and early tomorrow. But I think that New Mexico should be able to get the win. But I don't know if I'm going to pick them. This is probably the hardest game to predict in all of this bracket on the South region. I think I'm going to go with Marquette, actually, because just David Joplin and Stevie Mitchell, I think they should be able to get it done. Next up, we have Michigan State and Bryant. I'm not going to go too much into depth about this one. Bryant does not have any good wins. They lost to teams like Brown, St. John's by a lot, Grand Canyon by a ton, and St. Bonaventure. That's a pretty easy pick. Michigan State's going to easily win that. Next up, we go to the West region. This is another region that's really hard to decide who's going to really win. But in this first game, it's pretty easy. I got Florida over Norfolk State. None of the 16 seeds are good enough this year to beat any of the 1 seeds. And this is also one of the years that we've had some of the best 1 seeds in the history of college basketball. Brian Moore Jr. on Norfolk is really good, but they've had losses to Grand Canyon, Hofstra, and Stanford. I don't think that they'll be able to beat Florida. They may put up a fight and keep it within 10, but I really think it's going to be a blowout. Florida is a 29-point favorite. That's crazy. Next up, we have another one of the hardest games to predict, in my opinion, this year. Oklahoma Sooners versus UConn Huskies. This year, Oklahoma went 20-13 and 6-12 in the SEC, 13th in the conference. They do have the 67th best offensive rating in the country, and they did only really make it into the tournament because of their quad 1 wins. They have wins over Arizona, who's in the tournament, Louisville, who's in the tournament, Georgia Tech, Michigan, who's in the tournament, but they also have some bad losses. All of them were against SEC teams. They were undefeated going into SEC play, but that's when things definitely went rough for the Sooners. They lost their first SEC game to Alabama by almost 30 points, 28. And I think that they do have a team that's engineered to be a March Madness contender, but the thing that's going to make me probably pick against them is that they only have 2 guys averaging double-digit points. They have Jeremiah Fears, a superstar freshman from Arizona, who's averaging 17, 4, and 4. He's a really good player. He's got a little bit of Trae Young in his game. I've watched a lot of his games. He's probably one of the best players in the tournament this year. And then they have Jalen Moore, a 6'6" forward who's averaging 16, 6, and 1. I think that they will make this a close game, but I don't think they really have what it takes to win over a UConn team who has a lot of experience, who also has won back-to-back national championships. They're going for a 3-peat. They're probably not going to get it. But they have a coach that's coached 2 straight national championship teams and got consideration for the Lakers head coaching job. They have a few guys that returned from that team last year. Solo Ball is coming back from that championship team. Alex Karabin, Hassan Jara, Samson Johnson, Jalen Stewart. They just have experience coming back, and Alex Karabin and Liam McNeely is one of the best duos in all of college basketball. Give me UConn in this game. Next up, we have Memphis and Colorado State. This is another game that I've been choosing back and forth between in my 10 brackets I've made so far. Memphis is a really good team. Don't get me wrong. They won the American Athletic Conference, going 16-2 in conference play and 29-5 overall. They have a good coach in Penny Hardaway, and they have the 37th most points per game in all of college basketball. But I don't know if they're going to be able to get it done over 12-seeded Colorado State, because Colorado State, we'll get to them in a second, but they're a really, really good team. Memphis does have a superstar, though. Sophomore guard PJ Haggerty is averaging 22, 6, and 4. And they have another guard Tyrese Hunter, transfer from Texas and Iowa State, who's averaging 14, 4, and 4. This team's got great guard play, and they also have good center and forward play. Dane Dange's a 6'9" senior who's averaging 14, 7, and 2. He's a big body, 6'9", 270. And they also have Musa Cisse, a 6'10" senior who's averaging 6 and 6. He's more so of an athletic guy who can go out and block shots and get rebounds. I think that they are engineered to beat a team like Colorado State, but Colorado State's definitely an underdog team that's going to put up a fight and is maybe going to win. They went 25-9 this year and only had 4 conference losses in a really hard Mountain West. And they're led by senior 6'5" shooting guard Nick Clifford, who's averaging 19, 10, and 4. He's the decision maker in this game for me. He's the guy I'm going to go with. Give me Colorado State and the Rams to upset Memphis. Next up, we have Maryland versus Grand Canyon. This is a pretty easy decision for me. I really like Grand Canyon this year, and they got kind of screwed over with a really hard matchup. But it's not going to really be close, in my opinion. I do like Grand Canyon a lot, though, because they're a really, really solid team. But Maryland is 25-8. They finished second in the Big Ten. And they have a freshman center, Derek Queen, who's averaging 16, 9, and 2. They also have a point guard, Jacoby Gillespie, 6-footer, who's averaging 15, 3, and 5. And they have the highest scoring starting lineup in all of college basketball this year, with other experienced guys like Rodney Rice, who's averaging 14, Julian Reese, a senior forward, who's averaging 13, Selton Miguel, who's averaging 12 as a junior guard. He's been all over Kansas State, South Florida, Maryland. I think that Grand Canyon is a good enough team. I didn't mean to click that, by the way. They do have Tyon Grant Foster, who last year was one of the best players in all of college basketball and almost led them to a first-round win. But something happened to Tyon, and he got worse. Last year, he averaged 20 points a game. This year, he's down to 14.5. And if he was still at that level of play, the 20 points a game, I would probably be picking Grand Canyon. But it's just he's not as good anymore, and they don't have a guy who can get to the basket and get points. Jacoby Coles is a slower-paced guy. Think of like Luka Doncic. Obviously, he's not as good, but he's a more slow-paced guy who just gets to his spots and makes shots. I'm going to go with Maryland. Although Grand Canyon, if Tyon Grant Foster comes out and has a good game, don't be surprised if they can beat Maryland. Missouri and Drake. This is another really hard matchup to pick because I really like what Drake has this year. They have Bennett Sturtz, who's one of the best players in all of college basketball right now. He's averaging 19, 4, and 6 and had great performances against teams like Kansas State, where they upset them. Vanderbilt, they beat. Miami. Bradley, they beat twice, who's a really good team. And Florida Atlantic. I really like this team. And they have a first-year head coach, Ben McCollum, and they're doing all of this. I think that they can win this game. It's just going to be hard because they're really undersized. Their tallest guy is 6'9", Cam Manyawu, who's only averaging 7 and 5. He's not a main contributor. Bennett Sturtz is their main guy, but outside of him, they don't have much. They're a great shooting team, though. That is one thing I will give them. They have the 42nd best offensive rating in the country, and if you look at their team stats, they're shooting 36% from 3, and they allow their opponents to only shoot 44% from the field, which is 208th best in the country, and only allow... What else is there here? They're just a good team. Good coached by Ben McCollum. The only reason I'm wondering if I should pick them or not is because Missouri's size. And they're people that can play defense. Dennis Gates is the head coach. They're 22-11 this year. And they have Mark Mitchell, who's a big body power forward averaging 14 and 5. No one's going to be able to guard him. And I really like Drake this year. I think that any other matchup they can win first round, but give me Mizzou in this one. Texas Tech, UNC Wilmington. I'm not going to go into much detail. That Texas Tech has JT Toppin, who's the Big 12 Player of the Year, averaging 18 and 9. And UNC Wilmington's best win was probably Charleston Southern. I've got to go Texas Tech in this game, and it's probably not going to be very close. Next up, we have another pretty good matchup, Arkansas and Kansas. The guy I think will be the decision maker in this game, though, is Hunter Dickinson. Arkansas is a really good team, but Hunter Dickinson's an All-American who's a big body center. He's very experienced, and he's just part of a really well-coached team with Bill Self. And I think Bill Self, he's been to this game so much. He's been to the tournament 35 years in a row. And they do have guys with Hunter Dickinson. They have Zeke Mayo, who's averaging 14, 5, and 3. He's a really good contributor. He's been to the tournament before with South Dakota State. They have DeJuan Harris, who's a great point guard defender. Just like a short point guard who can lock up the other team's point guard. They have KJ Adams, who's a lob threat. Arkansas is a really good team, though. I will give them that. They are a team that can beat Kansas. This is a great coaching matchup as well. John Calipari versus Bill Self. Arkansas has some young, athletic, experienced guys like Boogie Fland, who's going to be back for the tournament, and Adu Thero and Zvonimir Ivisic. But I think that their experience is really going to be the main thing in this game. I think I got to go Kansas. It's going to be a really good game. I will say that. This is going to be one of the best games of the entire tournament, but give me the Kansas Jayhawks. Next up, St. John's Omaha. Just give me St. John's. They have the best defense by the eye test in all of college basketball this year, and they're playing against the Omaha Mavericks. This shouldn't even be a close game. They're 18.5-point favorites. I don't know if their offense will be able to put up that many points against a decent Omaha defense, but their defense is just that good. Next up, Duke versus either American or Mount St. Mary's. That's easy. Give me Duke. Mississippi State and Baylor. This is another game that I've really struggled to pick on because these are two teams who are pretty similar to each other. Baylor was seventh in the Big 12, going 19-14 with Coach Scott Drew, who has won a national championship before. They have the 54th best offensive rating in all of college basketball and are a really good, well-balanced team with 6'7" big man No Chad Omier, who's averaging 16 and 11, and freshman wing VJ Edgecombe, who's averaging 15 and 6. Mississippi State also has some really good guys, though. And they're not going to just bow down and let Baylor beat them. They have guys like Josh Hubbard, who's averaging 19, 2, and 3 as a 5'10" sophomore point guard. And Keyshawn Murphy, who's a 6'10" big man, averaging 12 and 8. I think that I have to go Baylor, though, just because of how many scorers they have on that team. They have to be able to pull it off against Mississippi State. Next up, Oregon and Liberty. This is a game I've picked Liberty a lot in my 10 brackets because Oregon is a solid team, but they lost a lot of their guys from that team last year that made a run, and I think that it should be an easy game for Oregon. I didn't mean to click that, by the way. They are 6.5-point favorites, but I do really like Liberty and their shot making. They're a great three-point team. If you can read this yourself. But they have what you need for an upset team. Plays slow, shoots the three often and efficiently. And they also have some decent wins this year. They've beaten Kansas State, Charleston, and they played close against FIU and beat McNeese State, who's also in this tournament. I'm actually going to go with Liberty. Oregon is a taller team. They have a 7-foot big man, Nate Biddle, but he's been kind of inconsistent this year and last year. I think Liberty is the perfect upset pick this year. Arizona and Akron. Arizona is a team I've watched a lot this year. I haven't seen one Akron game, though, not even the conference championship. They're coached by John Gross and went 28-6 and 17-1 in the MAC this year. They have the 24th best offensive rating in all of college basketball. That's pretty surprising. But one thing I hate about this team, I didn't mean to click that, they only have two guys averaging more than 10 points a game. Nate Johnson, 14, 5, and 3. He looks pretty good. And then Tavari Johnson, who's averaging 13, 2, and 4. I think that they are a team that could be an upset pick. They're kind of built like one. I got to look at their shooting, though. They shoot 36 from 3 on 30 attempts a game. Oh, my goodness. That's a lot of threes per game to only shoot 36%. It looks like their defense is pretty solid, though. I don't think that they'll be able to beat Arizona, though. Arizona's got Caleb Love, who's one of the better guys in all of college basketball right now. They went 22-12 in a pretty decent top-heavy Big 12, and I think that Caleb Love will be the decision maker. I'm going with Arizona, but I wouldn't be surprised if Akron's able to win. BYU and VCU. This is another game that people have been debating about a lot. BYU was pretty good this year. They went 24-9 and 14-6 in the Big 12, finishing third in the conference with first-year head coach Kevin Young. They were 17th in the AP final poll and had the 16th best offensive rating in the country. They just don't have a main go-to guy. Richie Saunders is really good. 6'6" shooting guard, averaging 16, 4, and 2. And then they have Igor Demon from Russia, who's averaging 10 and 4. But they're the only two guys averaging double digits. And that's not a great thing. Cannon Catchings, a 5-star wing, is averaging 8 and 2. And he could have a good game. But the thing I really like about VCU is they have their own white guy to rival Richie Saunders, Max Shulga, who's really good, and he looks like a guy that honestly could be the next March Madness legend. Shulga is a 6'4" guard, averaging 15, 6, and 4, and they also have Joe Bamasil, who's averaging 15, 5, and 2. One thing I do like about Joe Bamasil is he's very experienced. He's been all around college basketball. He's played at Virginia Tech, George Washington, Oklahoma, and VCU. Lots of different environments, and he's always been good except out at Oklahoma. And I think that he's a guy that could really be a decision maker in this game. BYU is a really good team. Every game I've watched them, they've ended up getting crazy wins, had great team basketball, and played really good defense. But honestly, I feel like VCU is the better team for a March Madness game. They have the 5th best defensive rating in all of college basketball and 34th best offensive rating. Give me the VCU Rams. Next up, Wisconsin and Montana. I don't know anything about Montana except their leading scorer is a guy named Money Williams, I think. They were 25-9 this year. Money Williams is their best player, averaged 13, 4, and 3. They only had 4 guys averaging double digits, which is actually pretty decent. But they don't have any really go-to guy who can go out and get 20, I don't think. They have some awful losses, and Wisconsin's just got great scoring. Although they don't have a super good team, John Tonje is a really good guy. Montana got blown out by both Tennessee and Oregon and lost by 12 to Utah State. They lost by 30 to Northern Iowa, and that's really what's going to determine it for me. If you're losing by 30 to Northern Iowa, I don't think you're going to be able to beat Wisconsin in the tournament, especially a Wisconsin team like this. St. Mary's and Vanderbilt. This is another really good game. We have some outstanding matchups this year. This might be one of the better March Madness brackets we've ever had. St. Mary's is 28-5, led by Coach Randy Bennett. They have the 41st best offensive rating in the country this year and don't have any bad losses, really. They did lose to Utah State, but only by 7. Boise State by 2. Arizona State by 4, which all aren't bad losses by a bunch of points, but they should have won. They lost to San Fran by 1, and they lost to Gonzaga by 7 in the conference championship. I do think that is a bad thing. Losing all those games to not great teams, but they did hold USC to only 36 points. They beat Nebraska, who was a fringe tournament team. And I really think that they could go on a run. I'm not saying that they will. I'm not even saying that they'll win first round because Vanderbilt's a really good team. They were my one of my sleeper picks going into the tournament just because of what they've been able to do against better teams. They beat Tennessee by 1 point. They only lost by 20 to Alabama at Alabama. They beat Kentucky by 5. And they beat Texas A&M at Texas A&M by 2. They're really a team that can win games at home, but they did only go 8-10 in the SEC. The thing I like about them is their style of play. They don't have any superstar guy. Jason Edwards is averaging 17, but when I've watched them, it's really just been good team basketball, and I do like that about them. And the fact that they've been able to win good games, although it is on their home court, they've won a lot of those. They're in Cleveland, which isn't that far from Tennessee. They should be able to get some fans in the crowd. And I think I'm going to go with Vanderbilt in this game. That's not a popular pick. It might not even be a pick that I stand by myself, but I think that they can win that game. Alabama and Robert Morris, I don't even care who Robert Morris has. Alabama should easily win this game. They're 24-point favorites, and Cam Woods is averaging 15, but Mark Sears is averaging 19, and they're just a well-rounded Alabama team. Moving on to the Midwestern region, Houston over SIUE. I did watch the SIUE Conference Championship game, but they aren't a good enough team to beat Houston. Houston is not a team that's going to go on a run this year, but they are a team that will beat SIUE. Next up, Gonzaga and Georgia. This is another really good matchup. We have 5-star freshman Asa Newell at Georgia, who's averaging 15, 7, and 1, versus a really stacked Gonzaga team. Gonzaga is led by Graham Eek, who's averaging 17, 8, and 1. He's a giant center, great interior defender and rebounder. He's 6'9", 250. They also have Caleb Battle, a transfer in his first year with the program, 6'5" guard, averaging 13 and 3. Nolan Hickman's another really good guy to watch, 11, 3, and 2. Braden Huff is really good, and Ryan Nembhard, the younger brother of Pacers Andrew Nembhard, is averaging 11, 3, and 10 assists a game. I think that this is really a team that should be able to win if you're Gonzaga, because Georgia has not been able to get it done against better teams. Gonzaga did struggle this year, but I think that they should be able to win this game, and they're honestly a team that can go on a run in this year's tournament. If we just take a quick look at Georgia's whole team, they had the 87th best defensive rating in the country, so not horrible, but not very great. They have Silas Damari, who's averaging 13 and 4. Blue Kane had a decent year, but they don't really have a guy that's going to stop Graham Eek. Santos Cyril is huge, but he's a true freshman, and I don't really know if he'll be able to do that good of a job. I got to go with Gonzaga in this game. Clemson and McNeese State, the manager team versus the Tigers. I think that McNeese State could win this game, but after I saw all of the ESPN advanced stats and everything, there's no way I can pick them anymore. Because if you look here at ESPN, they do these little things that you get, and they did a computer simulation, play-by-play computer simulation of the game. Clemson won 83% of the time to McNeese's 17%. Similar games, Clemson is favored in 77% of the games, and 79% of America is picking Clemson. This is a game that McNeese State could upset, but I really like Clemson's team with Chase Hunter, Dylan Hunter, and Ian Shefflin. They have a really good offense, and Javon Garcia is really good. Will Wade is a great coach, but I think that I have to go with the Clemson Tigers. I do kind of want to see what happened to Allen Breed, though, because if he's playing and he was out at the beginning of the year, then that might change my mind a little bit. I don't really see anything. Yeah, I have no idea. But I don't think that McNeese State will be able to put up much of a fight because Clemson's just a great offense, one of the better ones in college basketball. Purdue and High Point. This is another good game. I really don't like Purdue this year, but it's just the fact that they have Braden Smith, who's an All-American, averaging 17 and 10 or whatever he's averaging, and they have Trey Kaufman-Wren, who's also averaging 20 and 6. This team's just got the two good guys that can carry them to a win. High Point's a really good team, and I've liked them all year coming into the season. Coached by Alan Huss, they're 29 and 5. But I really think that they're going to struggle against Purdue just because Purdue's offense is insane. High Point does have a crazy good offense, though. They have the 19th most points per game in all of college basketball and the second best offensive rating in the country. But I just don't really think they'll be able to beat Purdue. They do have Kiza Gifa, who's a senior guard averaging 15, 2, and 2. And Kamani Hamilton, who's averaging 13 and 5. Demarion Williams, who's averaging 13, 3, and 2, who I think used to play at Texas Tech. Yeah, he's a guy that could be a difference maker in this game. He was at Texas Tech last year, only averaged 0.3 points a game in 7 games. But he's definitely a guy who can score the ball now. And I think that they could win this game. But I got to go Purdue. They're probably going to win. Next up, Illinois versus Texas. I'm not even going to go into too much detail about this game because there's so many YouTube videos you can watch about people going on what they think will happen in this game, about how bad Illinois has been. I did think Illinois was going to win this game, but give me Texas. Texas is a really solid team. If they beat Xavier tonight, they should easily be able to beat Illinois because Xavier's not on the same level as Illinois. But I just really like Texas's team. They have Trey Johnson, a freshman guard, averaging 20 points a game. They have Arthur Kaluma, a transfer from Kansas State, who's averaging 12 and 8. They have Jordan Pope, who's averaging 11 and 2. Caden Shedrick, averaging 9 and 6. And Tremont Mark. They have all these transfers who were starters at their old team, who were that guy on their old teams. And they're going against Illinois, who's an inexperienced team, who apparently has really bad statistics going against them. Kentucky versus Troy. I'm just going to go with Kentucky. I've seen stuff that Troy might win with Taden Connerway, but I think Kentucky's got to be able to win that. And our last two first-round matchups, Utah State versus UCLA. I've got to go with Utah State. They're the better overall team. UCLA is very solid, but that's just about it. They're solid. They're not a great basketball team. And then lastly here, Tennessee and Wofford. Chaz Lanier versus Corey Tripp. Corey Tripp's a great guy. He's been a solid college basketball guy for his whole career. But I think that the Wofford Terriers are not going to do anything to Tennessee. They scored 35 points against Duke. That's all I got to see. Give me the Volunteers. Now here in the second round, Auburn versus Louisville. Johnny Broom versus Terrence Edwards. Chad Baker-Mazara versus Chucky Hepburn. This is going to be a really good game. They do both have a common opponent, which is Duke. Auburn lost by 6 and held them to 84 points. And Louisville played them twice. They lost by 11 and lost by 11. This is a game that I really think just depends on how Auburn plays. If they come out and are playing aggressive defense, getting buckets, getting easy points, then they're going to easily win. If Louisville comes out and is stopping Janai Broom and is getting points in transition and is getting a couple stops, hitting some threes, Louisville's going to win. It's just going to determine who starts the game better, I think. And since I don't know how the game's going to start, I'm going to go with Auburn for now, but I really, really, really wouldn't be surprised if Louisville is able to win that game. Next up, we have Michigan versus Yale. This is a rematch of Danny Wolf versus his former team last year, and I think that just the same thing as round one. Michigan's got 2 7-footers, and Yale, we looked at them earlier, they are one of the smallest teams in the tournament this year. Their starting center is like 6'6", and their backup is 6'10", but he's only averaging 3 points a game. Michigan's got to be able to win that. Next up, North Carolina versus Iowa State. If Keyshawn Gilbert was playing, this would be an easy Iowa State pick for me. But since he's out, it's going to be a little bit closer. But I still think that they should be able to win just because of the UNC's coaching. They don't have a good coach. Hubert Davis is not a great coach, and they do have a great team, but Iowa State is the best offense overall in college basketball, I think, this year. I've watched them play like 6 or 7 times, and they just are able to get buckets whenever they want. I think they should be able to take care of business against UNC. Next up, Marquette and Michigan State. Cam Jones versus Jaden Akins in the backcourt is going to be a really good matchup. The thing I don't like about Michigan State, like I've been saying a lot about a lot of teams, they don't have a real go-to guy who can get 20 points a game. But their defense and their coaching with Tom Izzo, I think you just got to go with Michigan State. Because Marquette, they do have Cam Jones. And they do have David Joplin and Stevie Mitchell like we looked at earlier. But I think Michigan State's the team that can really beat them and go on a run this year. Next up in the West for the round of 32, Florida and UConn. This is going to be a lot closer game than people think. But I think I got to go with Florida in this game just because of how they've played this year. UConn has been really good at the end of the year. And even at the beginning of the year, sometimes they looked like a really solid team. But I don't think that they're going to be able to beat Florida just because of Florida's experience, their just overall team. UConn is the back-to-back reigning national champions, but I think that they'll just be a little bit overmatched by Florida this year. Next up, Colorado State and Maryland. For the same reasons as I picked Maryland in the first round, I'm going to pick them here in the second round. They have the highest scoring starting 5 in all of college basketball, and they just have guys who can be great March Madness guys. Derek Queen is a really good big man, and I think he can be one of the best players in March Madness this year. Next up, Missouri and Texas Tech. Texas Tech's a great team, and so is Missouri. But Texas Tech has the best player in college basketball, or at least the best player in the Big 12. He's probably top 7 or 8 in college basketball. And they've won a lot of good games this year. And they have a guy who's going to be a lottery pick this year in the NBA. And they have another great role player, Chance McMillan. I think Texas Tech's going to take care of business. I don't want to pick them just because they're another higher seed advancing. But I think that they're going to take care of business. I really do. Next up, St. John's versus Kansas. This is a game that's really going to be hard to pick because Kansas this year has looked really good. And they have arguably the best team on paper in college basketball, but they've had locker room problems with Zeke Mayo getting like threats from the Kansas fans. They've had issues as a team. And St. John's is very well coached. They are one of the best teams in all of college sports right now. And actually, you know what? I'm picking Arkansas over Kansas. Rick Pitino versus John Calipari, and I think Pitino is going to be able to get it done. I think Kansas is a good enough team to win the first round matchup, but I don't think they will. I don't think that they're going to get it together against Arkansas, honestly. That's a really hot take, and maybe I shouldn't have picked that to happen, but you know what? I'm going to go with it, and hopefully it works out. Duke versus Baylor. I'm going to go with Duke and just not think twice about it. Arizona Liberty. Liberty can win this game, but will they? I really don't know. Arizona's a good team. I'm going to go with Arizona. I don't want to talk myself out of picking the team that should win. VCU, Wisconsin, VCU is going to win that. 100%. I think John Tonje is a really great player. Same thing with John Blackwell. But VCU, I really like this year. They're a team that can do some damage to brackets this year. Vanderbilt, Alabama. I think Vanderbilt already beat them this year. I think I was looking at that. Maybe they didn't. Oh, they lost. And then I don't know what happened the second time they played. Vanderbilt's a really good team, though, but on a neutral floor, I think you have to go with Alabama. I don't know if they're really going to get it done, but it's a bad idea that I'm picking all these higher seeds. And you know what? I'm gonna mix something up. I'm going to go back here, and I think UC San Diego is going to beat Michigan. And then here in the second round, UC San Diego versus Yale. UC San Diego is going to beat them. So now in this bracket, we have 1, 2, 3, and 12. Then here we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, which isn't going to happen. I got to change something up, and you know what? The first thing I think of happening here is UConn beating Florida. Florida is a really good team, don't get me wrong. But I just like UConn's depth better, and they're guys that can just go out and get buckets. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but I think they can beat Florida, honestly. Houston and Gonzaga. This is another tough game to predict. LJ Cryer is a really good guy, but he doesn't have the same supporting cast that Caleb Battle has at Gonzaga. And I think Gonzaga is going to take down another 1 seed here. I really think it's going to happen. I really do. Purdue and Clemson, same reason as I picked Purdue in the first round. 20 point per game score, and then 16 and 10 versus a bunch of 12 to 15 at Clemson. I think Kaufman Wren can go out and score 30, and I think Braden Smith can get 20 points on good 3-point shooting and a bunch of assists. They don't have the big men that I would like Purdue to have to go on an Elite 8 run, but I think that they can at least beat Clemson. Texas versus Kentucky. This is another tough one because Kentucky's a really good team, and I'm going to go Kentucky. Because Texas is good, and I think that they're one of the better rosters in college basketball, but they should have won more SEC games than they did if they were going to go on a run like this, so I can't really pick them. Utah State versus Tennessee. This is a tough one to pick, too, because Tennessee's a really good team. Chaz Lanier is Zakai Zeigler. I'm going to go Tennessee and not talk myself out of it. My Sweet 16 is set. Auburn's easily beating UC San Diego. Iowa State and Michigan State. I've got to go with Iowa State. Actually, you know what? I want to go Michigan State so bad. It's just they don't have the scoring I want to see from a team that's going to go to the Elite 8. They just really don't. They have the 68th best offensive rating in the country, but their leading scorer is only averaging 12 points a game, and they only have 2 guys averaging more than 10 points a game. They're not a great offense. Oh, I want to pick them, though, because I feel like I'm going to go Michigan State here. Michigan State and Auburn, 2 teams that made the Final Four in 2019. UConn, Maryland. I think it's got to be Maryland out of those 2 teams. Texas Tech, St. John's. This is another tough one. But I think Texas Tech just has the better offense than St. John's defense. Duke over Arizona. That's pretty easy to pick. VCU and Bama. I think VCU can make it to the Elite 8, but I don't think they will. I think they could win that game, but I really don't think they will. Gonzaga, Purdue. Oh, I gotta go Gonzaga. They're the better, well-rounded team than Purdue. Kentucky, Tennessee, that's Tennessee. Now the Elite Eight. Auburn over Michigan State. Texas Tech over Maryland. Duke over Bama. Actually, Bama over Duke. I think the experience with Mark Sears, Grant Nelson, all them is better than the young Duke Cooper Flag-led team. Gonzaga, Tennessee. Gotta go Tennessee. Now the Final Four. Texas Tech's going to beat Auburn. And then Alabama, Tennessee. I got to go Alabama. In the national championship, April 7th. In this bracket, I have to go with Alabama, I guess. And we'll say 130 is the combined score. I don't really know if that's what's going to happen, but it just felt right, honestly. That's crazy. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.